So in this video, we're going to cover some basic brushes. There's no need to show you all of them at this time because there are a lot of brushes, and you don't want to get into a situation where you're just messing up your model because you don't know what a brush does. And you need to start with some very basic ones just to learn sculpting, and if you've never used a tablet before or a Cintiq, you need pressure sensitivity and all that. So this is something to get used to, and it will take a little bit if you're new to it. So right now I'm working with a tablet for this video. The basic brushes I want to go over will be the one that it starts with is a standard. If you hover your pen over the tablet but not pressing down yet, if you're hovering over, just slightly over, you'll see that I'm moving it just like I'm moving the mouse. Once you're ready to start sculpting, you can push down. Now, Control Z undo. Now if I go really light, you can see I'm just slightly moving it. But the harder I press, the more definition you're going to get. And you'll also see up here in the top, like right under here, you'll see these dots. This is basically your history, and you can scroll all the way back. It captures a lot of history, and that's what will also make your file huge if you save it as a ZPR. If you save it as that, it's going to capture all your history. So as I undo, back to the regular sphere. So pressure sensitivity is going to be very important when you sculpt because you want to start light and build. You want to just slowly build form. Now we have a couple ways to work with this. We have these buttons up here, Z add, Z sub, and Z intensity. You are currently in Z add, which means whatever I push on is going to add and push up. If I click Z sub, it's going to push in. Now, I don't recommend going back and forth and picking these because the hotkey to switch between them both is the Alt key. So if I'm adding, I hold the Alt, and you'll see now on my cursor there's a minus icon there. And now as I'm holding Alt, I'm digging in. And then when I let go of the Alt, I'm building up. And you can change the intensity. Right now it's at Z intensity of 25. If I bring that all the way up to 100, you're going to see even just going lightly with the tablet is going to make it really stand out. I hold the Alt, it's really going to dig in. But I recommend you do not keep it like that. Once in a while you'll have to adjust the Z intensity. You're going to dictate the intensity by how much you push, because you can get it to that. How much you push down on the tablet will get you that result. Don't set a default setting to too strong. In fact, I usually go a little bit lighter because I like to build. It makes a smoother transition between your shapes. And then you carve in like that. You're going to make like an eye socket or something. And then you can switch back a little bit and bring it up a little higher. I always start very low. Now the other button to work with is the Shift button, which will switch it to a smooth brush. Now if I hold down Shift, if you see right now, I'm hovering over the brush button. It's telling me what brush is active. If I hold down Shift, it switches to smooth. So hold down Shift. Now if I hold down Shift and start to sculpt, I'm smoothing these areas. You're going to be doing a lot of that. So that will help as you just slowly build up and then smooth. That will make transitions of muscle and everything just work out way better. build a nose. But you want to smooth that transition. Now we're working with very low geometry right now, and that's what I want you to do. We're not getting into big time sculpting just yet. It's about the interface and learning these brushes. So to recap, you're going to work with the Z-add, Z-sub on a standard brush. It just comes with it when you start up ZBrush. And lightly make your strokes with the pen tablet. Hold an Alt to carve in, and hold a Shift to smooth. Now one thing you'll notice is I am working in symmetry. It always starts you, especially if you start with a Dynamesh 32, which is what we are starting with. Symmetry is enabled automatically. If you would not like symmetry, you will hit the X key and you'll see the little dot on the other side go away. So switching between that will give you asymmetrical features, which is what you want to do later on. You don't want everything to look like a mirror copy of itself. That's not how we're built. So X, and you can go up into transform, and all the way down the bottom where it says symmetry, that's the button to activate it. So it's on or off, and you can do X, Y, and Z. You can do radial. You can get some neat stuff with that. You can see on the X-axis, it's telling you it wants to do radial symmetry. You can go to transform again, go off of X, but go to Y, which is kind of neat. Or you can go to, you can have all three on, which is kind of funky. But you can have them all off except for Z. You can have them all off except for Y. So I want to put like a little detail there, like a hat or something. And you can go back. Well, you gotta get off radial and click that. So that's under transform. Now again, if we want to go all the way back, you can do Control Z, or you can just grab this button where it says Undo History 80 and go all the way back to the beginning. Which is kind of neat. So the next thing to talk about is right next to it where it says Focal Shift and Draw Size. So Focal Shift, well, Draw Size is the size of the brush. So if I drag this up, down, you'll see my brush gets bigger and smaller. The hotkey for that is, there's a couple ways to do it, but bracket keys on your keyboard. You can hold it in and out, or just tap it, and it will make it smaller and bigger. The focal shift is that circle in the middle of our outer circle on our cursor. That will determine how hard or soft. It's basically the fall off of your brush. So if it's all the way up like this, you're going to get a very, it's good. You're going to get a very hard with no fall off, a hard stroke with no fall off. But if I change the focal to smaller, it's going to be a lot softer. Usually I just use the default settings, but you can play with that if you need like a very hard edge. You can do that. Now a quick way to go through all of these is if you hold in the spacebar. Spacebar is almost like a little hot box here that brings it up. wherever your mouse cursor is. So if you need to just quickly change the size of your brush instead of the bracket keys, you can hold in the space and mess with your focal, mess with your draw size, you can mess with your intensity, and you can also get to other brushes here too. You can get to your wireframe, which we'll go over more later. You can get to your move. So it's neat. It's a little hotbox of kind of a lot of your major navigation tools. So the other brushes I want you to mess around with, you can come up here and click on this and you'll see tons of brushes, and there's even more in our lightbox. If you go to lightbox, you can go over to brushes, brush, and there's even more stuff in here. They just couldn't put it all in the default UI. But don't go in there right now, there's just too much. But clicking on that will bring you all kinds of stuff. And I know you're going to want to experiment and just do all this crazy stuff. Please don't do it for at least the initial assignment, because a lot of these have more to them than just you use your pen and you draw on it. They do other things that we are not ready to talk about yet. So you can either click over here, or if you hit the B hotkey, we'll just bring it up right in front. So that's a quick way to do it. And usually your last used brushes will come up to quick pick, and all the others are in here. You can filter them by letter. So if I want the standard brush, if I hit S, it will filter everything else that starts with S, and I can pick one of these. So soft clay, concrete, polish, snake hook, standard, but I already have it selected. And then the number or letter next to it will give you the hotkey to select it. So if I wanted, I don't know, slash, you hit the 3, and now we'll have that selected. So you do B, filter it, L, and then these are the only two here, so I do A. And that will bring you to a different brush. Now if I want to go back to standard, I can just do B, and you can see some of the last used brushes are up here, so I'll use standard. So standard is one brush. The other brush I want you to use is clay buildup. It simulates clay a lot more, and it has an easier, has a more natural fall off to it. I generally use standard now for like clothing and big wrinkles and folds, but for generally building up muscle, clay buildup is kind of the tool to use. So really building up these forms, clay buildup is kind of where you want to be. So play around with that. Size smaller. Then if I want to move them up, I can go to here, rotate them like this. And then if I want to change the, remember from the last video, I can do Alt and reset our pivot. Now to go back to draw, I want to hit the Q hotkey. And you can go from perspective to orthographic with P. Use the smooth it out. And again, I don't want anybody subdividing right now and using lots of geometry. I know this is very low, but this is just to get used to, again, to get used to the UI. And you can be surprised. You can get a lot of interesting detail with something this low. Doesn't look fantastic, but you can easily move around stuff. So speaking of move, the move brush is the other one I want you to look at. So you can do B, M for move. And there's a couple different moves, but use this one that's just regular move, which is the V hotkey. V. Now, this one I use all the time. I actually use this, I almost always use this to start out with before I even get into the brushes, because this will help you really build forms. So let's make the brush big. and really it pulls, it pushes like big areas, big fall off areas. So this is really how you're going to start getting your big shapes. So this sphere stops looking like a sphere and it starts looking like, a face. So by way of using the move and the smoothing, you can get these new shapes and it starts becoming not a sphere anymore, because eventually just having a sphere head is going to not be acceptable as a model. Even if you did a nice little face on it, it still looks like a sphere. So you need to start using tools like this. I take the move tool and I make the brush really wide, so that's really going to help you go beyond the primitive shape that you start with. Just like in 3D Studio Max, eventually you want to get past the primitives. So within a few moves of the move brush, we are here. And we have something that looks not great, but it looks better than a sphere. And this is really how we start building big forms. And then when you kind of have your form ready, you can go in with the clay buildup. And then start digging in stuff like the eye holes and starting to get muscle in here. Get the neck muscles. Build out more forms. And you can see with just not a lot of geometry, you can get something that's not bad. I mean, this isn't how we'll continue to work, but once you're familiar with the tools, we will go higher in geometry and get some pretty nice results here. So using these brushes will help you get the look you want. It's very good for blocking out and using low geometry like what we have here. You can easily move around big sections of the model. When you have so much geometry, that move tool will only be grabbing, it'll be grabbing a lot of geometry, but in a small condensed space. So your model will usually end up lumpy as you're trying to move stuff around and smooth stuff out. It's easier to smooth with low geometry and easier to move. So you always have to make sure you build up the primary forms first by moving big pieces of clay or geometry. Then you can get into the tiny details, but that's later. And that's when you want to be in the millions and millions of polygons, but not right now. It's not the time. So once we have that, the other thing I want to talk about is lazy mouse. Now if we go back to standard, again, as we draw, you might see there's like a little red trail on this brush. That is lazy mouse. That is like a fall off, and it follows your stroke. If you're trying to do something very straight and you have a wobbly hand, lazy mouse can help make that stroke cleaner and straighter. And you can access how long that lazy mouse is by going over to the stroke button up top here and going into lazy mouse. There's lazy mouse, the button to turn on or off. The hotkey is L. So L with it off, L with it on. You can see that the stroke becomes straighter. Now, with it on, the one you want to look at is, well, the two things are lazy radius and lazy step. Lazy radius is how long the trail is. So as I go up higher, if you want like a really strong tail to this to make it your stroke even straighter or more even, you want like a higher lazy radius. You'll see that stroke behind it. So if you're really trying to get like if you're trying to sculpt some fine detail, like a design or something, and you really need a smooth stroke and your hand's wobbly as you're trying to do it without it, lazy mouse will definitely help that. And you can even use it in the opposite way to carve in. Lazy step is how many dots are together. So it's kind of like a brush in Photoshop where it is an alpha of something, probably a circle, and the higher up you go, let me bring that lazy mouse radius down back to something, but with a step of maybe 5 or something like that, 3, you can see it's kind of like a dot. You might not be able to see it too great, but you can see how it's moving. It's going dot, 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 like that. So it's spacing out, almost like over here where it shows dots. It's going dot, 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 dot. But if I go to stroke and bring it all the way down to 0, it's going to be nice and smooth. Like all those circles are together, like all these dots are together. So it makes one smooth line. So that's it for lazy mouse. Another thing that I want to talk about quickly is backface masking. So let's go to the move brush so we have something to work with. If I pull this out, I'm trying to give like a good example here. I don't know if I'll get it with this one, but what happens is, like if you're making like a sword or a weapon or something with very thin geometry, like what I'm trying to get here. It looks funny. If you use a standard brush, or any other brush, and say you had your intensity up high, and you start to dig into the model, right? Because you want to sculpt something, you'll start to see that the deeper I go, it will start to push to the other side. Maybe this is still too thick, but when you're in a situation where it's very thin, finally, you can start to see that I'm pushing through to the other side because I'm just digging real deep in here, right? So if you're trying to carve detail on a thin sword or a thin shape, you don't want to be pushing geometry through to the other side. So what we can do is something called backface masking. Now I have it here on my custom UI, but you can find it under brush because it works per brush. Brush, auto masking, and then right down here it says backface mask. And what that does when turned on is it basically, as you're brushing here on one side, it's behind the scenes masking the other side. And we'll go over masking in the next video. But now, with that turned on, if I keep pushing down, it's not coming out the other side. There's going to be a point where it just can't go any further, but it masked it, so it won't push the other side. So this is a really handy tool to be using. So I would always make sure that you would have this in your custom UI if you can use one. Make that thing right in front of you, because I've done it many times where I've sculpted on a thin piece and then went to the other side and just messed up the back really bad. So there's that. Let's go all the way back to a sphere. Is mirror and weld. That's the last one, because sometimes, as we work in symmetry, it's fine. As we work in symmetry, it's probably what you want to do for the most part as you're starting your sculpts. But what happens if you accidentally were off symmetry and you started doing this, you're over here, and then you realized, oh no, I wanted symmetry on this side, but I don't have it. So what can we do about it? First thing to know about mirroring is it only likes to capture, from a orthographic view, the left side. I don't know why, but it will always copy the left side to the right side. So right now we are on the right side, so it's not going to start out the way we want it just yet. But to mirror, we go to geometry, we go to modify topology, and then there's this button called mirror and weld, and it has an X, Y, and a Z. So it's going to mirror it on the X-axis. So if I click mirror and weld, it's mirroring the left side to the right side. Now, the left side didn't have anything on it, but the right side did. But I wanted the right side detail to be on the left side. The way to fix that is to go down a little bit further to deformation. If you open that up, there's a mirror button. Now that is not mirror and weld, it is just going to mirror the entire model. So if I do mirror, it'll just pop it to the other side. Then I can go back to mirror and weld and click that. Then you can hit your X key to be back in symmetry, and you can start sculpting again. So I'll do it one more time, and then we'll finish this video. So we're sculpting in symmetry detail. I accidentally click off of X, and I did something to this side and then noticed that it wasn't happening on that side. So you need to first go to, if your detail is on the right side and you want it to be on the left side, you have to do this step first. Geometry, or go to deformation, mirror, so it goes on to the left side. Then go to geometry, modify topology, mirror and weld. If you just had detail on this side, all you have to do is do mirror and weld. That is it for this video on brushes and lazy mouse and masking, backface masking. Thank you.